In this video, we're going to talk about how should you be getting out of bed. We're going to talk about some of the risks. Why is it a vulnerable time for you? It's so often that either shortly after getting out of bed, people injure themselves, or in the process of getting out of bed, they flare things up. What can you do specifically to make this process smoother? How can you avoid some of the common mistakes that people, exercises or activities that people have prescribed, knee hugs, etc.? And how can you successfully start your day in a way that doesn't aggravate your back pain, or at least minimizes the amount of discomfort that you get in your lower back when getting out of bed? So let's get out of bed and start the video. So before we get into the bulk of this video, remember this is part of a series on daily activities or household activities and how you can tweak these, better understand the stresses these place on your spine, especially when you've got back pain, and how you can navigate through those daily tasks. A lot of them, like getting out of bed in the morning, it's unavoidable, we have to do it. But there are considerations we can put into place, and there are adjustments and adaptations we can make so that these activities cause us less distress, cause us less aggravation, and ultimately are less of a barrier to our recovery when it comes to back pain. So if we kick off this video with why is this particular time of the day a particular vulnerability? We've all heard of people, maybe even yourself, you get up in the morning, go to put those socks on and boom, that's when it happens. You go to brush your teeth in the morning, boom, that's when it happens. This time of day, there is a reason why it's a vulnerable time for those with a back injury, whether it's sciatica, whether it's a disc injury, whether it's just general back pain or hip pain, that sort of thing. This time of day can be really problematic. So let's get into why that is. So the first thing is, overnight, we're not moving. Movement is important, motion is lotion. It helps prevent excess buildup of fluid in this area of the lower back. And you might actually sleep quite well. You may not be someone that gets disrupted during the night, and if you do, that makes things a little bit more difficult because we're not sleeping as well. But the reason that things are so vulnerable this first thing in the morning is everything in this area is a little bit more swollen. It's a little bit more irritated. It's a little bit more primed. There's more fluid in this area. Now remember, we've got these little holes that the spinal nerves exit from, and those can have a little bit more fluid in them. So if we have a little movement, a little twist, a little rotation, that can be enough to just tweak one of these nerves and irritate them a little bit, giving you that sharp pain. The second thing is, remember, we need to have good support, muscular support. An important part of any sensible program is having strengthening exercises in there. Maybe we need to progress through those and with different complexity as we go through a program, but we need to have strengthening exercises. Why? Because that provides stability to the spine. When are your muscles most relaxed? First thing in the morning. There's not that control, there's not that support, there's not that natural stabilization that a couple of hours of being up and about puts in place and provides the spine. So things are a little bit more vulnerable from a wobbly point of view. So if you do move in a little bit of an inappropriate manner, there's just a little bit more laxity in the muscles. They're not quite supporting this area the same way they would maybe after a couple of exercises or a couple of workouts. Because quite often we get people with a degree of instability in the back. Once they do 1 or 2 reps of some of these strengthening exercises, not to do that right now, but just general observations during the day, they actually find that everything tightens up and it provides them that extra bit of support to protect their lower back. Now, first thing in the morning, you have none of that. There is no passive muscle tone. Everything's nice and relaxed, and that can lead to vulnerabilities being exploited when we do a complex activity like getting from lying down to upright. So the next thing is, kind of following on from that earlier part, is the inflammation buildup. It's just that overnight, we're a little bit warmer, our body's under the duvet. We're getting heat driving more inflammation to that area of the lower back. Also, the body's trying to heal. It's driving more nutrients and more circulation to that area. But when we have an injury there, that process can be a little bit too much. So this whole area, much like just the fluid buildup that I mentioned earlier, there's inflammation in this section of the lower back, and that is going to make things a little bit more vulnerable. The final point here is that when we have some sort of disc issue, maybe it's degenerative, maybe we've got a degree of stenosis as a result of that degeneration in those discs, maybe we've got some degree of herniation or just damage generally to those discs. The mechanisms for them to grab and hold on to water aren't necessarily as good as they otherwise could be. They may be over-imbibed, they over-engorge themselves overnight, which creates a little bit more sensitivity to excess movement, and that can irritate things. It can create this feeling of stiffness in the lower back. And that's quite peculiar because we've just mentioned just a moment ago about a feeling of, or about a reality of vulnerability in the lower back because the muscles aren't there. But there's a lot of fluid in this area creating that sensation of stiffness. And quite often it's after, and this will become more relevant as we get into the what you should do later on. But after being upright a little bit and just allowing gravity to just squeeze out that extra unnecessary bit of fluid in that region, you find that things stabilize and limber up a lot more. Sometimes it is just a component of there's too much fluid inflammation in this area, creating that feeling of stiffness, and something could go at any moment. The most important thing here is being careful. Be careful with those first movements. Now let's get into a few of the things that you should and shouldn't be doing when you get out of bed in the morning. So you're in bed, you've just woken up. Now for some of these things, you might wake up on your front, you might wake up on your side, etc. We're going to assume you're waking up on your back, because if you've already woken up on your side, then these bits aren't quite as relevant, because you would have to turn onto your back to get into this position, and we just won't go down there. But one of the common exercises that people get first thing in the morning is going to be a little bit of that knee hugs. Bring these legs up here and just squeeze onto them nicely. Now that squeezing is opening out the back part of the vertebra. We're getting the spine here and we're opening it out like so, creating more space, which up until this point you're probably going to think that's a good thing, right? But what that's also doing is that's squashing down those discs first thing. It's irritating this section of the lower back here, and just really, it's just not something we want to do first thing. We want everything to stabilize in a comfortable position. There's a good chance, if you've been sleeping well, that these ligaments will have tightened up nicely overnight. So you've got a nice support for that curve, because what's happening when we have lower back issues is that there's a lot of compression forwards, and these tissues, these ligaments in the back here, are trying to heal up and restore the natural lordosis. If the first thing you do in the morning is break those adhesions and pull that back into flexion again, you're impairing and interfering with the natural healing process. So that's number one, and probably you've already seen other videos of ours that talk about that specific one being a problem. The next one is just one that's it's unnecessarily risky, and that is the knee rocks. It's rocking the knees over to one side and then over to the other side. Yes, this is done slowly, of course, but it's not a helpful movement. We want to get a bit of movement on board, and we're going to get to that a little bit in a moment, but we want to do it in a way that's as safe as possible. Putting torsion through those discs, putting rotation through the spine like so, can really aggravate the facet joints. If you've got any vulnerability in the facet joints, and we're moving into this position here, there's a good chance you could tweak them. Now that's not going to create a serious injury, it's not going to create a serious problem, objectively speaking, but it will create, quite often, a very sharp pain, which is, again, not serious objectively speaking, but it'll hurt. And that might make you jump, it might make you tweak, it will just not be a pleasant experience. So it's something to really watch out for. So the last really common one that people do, and you may think, oh, well, I can't do that anyway, so that's great. Don't go and do it later on though, because it's the habits of doing these things in the morning that actually creates trouble. And that is just getting out of bed, boom, straight up, and I'm up. What have I done there? I mean, you can probably see my back right now. It's rounded, because that's the way we do these things. Getting out of bed like that puts a one-off maximal compression through the lumbar spine. Very first thing you do in the morning. These things just aren't helpful. As we've discussed, there's extra inflammation in the lower back here. There's a little bit of vulnerability. We haven't got that muscle control. The muscles aren't awake. They're not active in the same way they might be maybe 20, 30 minutes from now. And finally, we have injuries in that section of the lumbar spine. These tissues are trying to heal and tighten back up to restore the lordosis in the overwhelming majority of cases. People have that injury, which is a flexion-based injury. They've gotten into a forward bending, they've damaged some of the tissues on the back here. And those are going to be trying to heal over every night. Every day, every time you have rest, your body is trying to heal. That's the big thing with back pain. Your body is trying to heal all the time. Whenever it gets a moment to rest, nighttime being a great opportunity, it is trying to knit things back together again. And the big problem is that a lot of the actions we're doing are just getting in the way of that process. They're disrupting that process. We've used the example before, I'll use it again. When you wake up in the morning, if you've got a cut on your elbow, if the first thing you do is bend your elbow, you rip that cut back open again, and it hurts, it doesn't feel good, and you keep doing that every morning inadvertently, you're going to end up with scar tissue around the area where the cut was. That scar tissue is less good, it's less elastic, it's less healthy, it's just generally not as good. We don't want that happening in our discs. Next part of the video is the actionable steps. So we're going to get into what the first thing is you should do immediately, how you should get up. You might have seen this elsewhere, but we're going to go through it. Hopefully it really gives you a nice solid routine to get out of bed. But then after that, we're going to discuss the important things that you should do next. What should you do? I'm sat here. So let's say you've got up to this position. What do I do now? What do I do over the next 10, 15 minutes, next half an hour, next hour or so? That we'll discuss as well, because that is also very, very important. So I'm back on my back again. I've just woken up. If you woke up on your side, then you're one step ahead of the game. So you can maybe fast forward the video to that part of the video. But the first thing is, we discussed earlier that there's too much inflammation in the lower back, fluid in the lower back just built up. As you can see, if I fall asleep in this position, my back is going to get rather sweaty overnight because of the heat, temperature. We discussed that in the sitting video. First thing you want to do is get a little bit of movement in, because the movement, so these sorts of knee rocks and things, there is a method in the madness, but it's just, that's not the best way to do it, because that has unnecessary risks. A shimmy, having your hands just on your hips where the pockets are, and just gently moving left and right, just a nice little gentle movement, that side bending this is the easiest way to do it, and it just starts getting a little bit of movement in the lower back in the safest possible manner, rather than extreme twisting. There's no chance when I'm doing a shimmy that my knees are accidentally going to fall too far and pull my back. When I'm in this position here, or even with the knees up, just a gentle shimmy is really the safest possible way. I'm in control, there's no extreme movements here, and there's no extreme levers. I can even use my hands to help me a little bit, get a little bit of movement, and if I press away from my torso, that can be nice too. If you've got the knees up like this, you can have one hand on the thigh and one hand on the other thigh, and almost use those as a little gentle lever just to push left and right. And you could do this for 30 seconds, you could do it for 20 seconds, you could do it a minute, just to get rid of some of that extra fluid. Remember we mentioned earlier, especially with degenerative discs in particular, or damage to the discs when they're not functioning properly and they can't hold on to the water properly and they over engorge overnight. This little bit of movement is just changing the pressure gradients there and just help remove some of that excess fluid from the lower back, which is going to make it a little less vulnerable for the next step. Nice thing about using your hands on your thighs to get that extra lever is there is a little bit of a stretch, a nice gentle one. And I'm not trying to pull my legs or push my legs out the window or off the bottom of the bed. It's gentle. We're just being gentle here, and that helps us get things moving. So the next one is, obviously, if you are right next to the bed, please move yourself in a little bit so we have some room. I don't want you doing this next one and just rolling off the side of the bed, because that's obviously not going to be very good for your back. So give yourself a little bit of room, and remember, you've hopefully already done the towel exercise. You know the importance of rolling without twisting the spine. So we want to flip onto our side. Now this is the bit that if you're a side sleeper, you're already here. So now you're in this side on position. A few important things of note. We've got a few key areas that are going to contribute to this, and hopefully you're not doing this for the first time, at 7 a.m. in the morning, 6 a.m. in the morning. If you're watching this during the day, maybe go upstairs and practice this with me, because with a little bit of practice, you're going to get really good at it, and then it's going to be even better for you and a nice long-term strategy. So number one, we've got this arm here that is going to be used as a bit of a power lever later on. Number two, our spine is remaining neutral. We're not rounded over, we're not arched too much, we're neutral, because we've just rolled, as if we've rolled off the towel, into this position. Number three is that our knees are just over the edge of the bed. They've just got that extra bit of room in a moment when we're going to use those to help us alongside the arm. And then, very simply put, requires a little bit of practice, but we're going to potentially use this arm as well to press down into the bed. We're going to move the hands, move the legs out to this position, and then we're going to push up in that position like so. That way I've kept my spine as neutral as possible. Now if we do it at full speed, you go back down, and this is also a good way to get into bed as well. So hopefully you've already clocked onto that. We just go in there and up. And that way I'm allowing my spine to stay neutral as it comes up. There's no twisting, I'm not rounding myself to get out of bed like so. I'm keeping everything nice and neutral, and with a little bit of practice, it's one easy movement, using the weight of your legs and your feet, and a little bit of a nudge from the side here, and a nice core engagement. And as the spine comes up, boom, we're here. We're not finished though. So depending on how high your bed is, it might be a high one. That's going to be easier for you. If it's a lower bed, then it's going to be a little bit more challenging. If we've got to do a deeper squat, then that might involve a little bit of moving the legs around to get into the right position. But essentially what we want to do now is have our feet planted, not round over and sit like this for a few minutes. We want to stay up nice and tall, and then we just get up in that position there. That's the important part. And often people just lean forwards like so and undo all of the good work we've done getting to this position so far. So just to recap here, we've got the little shimmy if you've woken up on your back. If you've woken up on your side, then you're already in one step ahead of the game. But we've rolled from the shimmy position onto our side. We're close to the edge of the bed, but not too close so we fall over. And then we've pendulumed ourselves up to this position. Now what do? You get up, you walk around. If you know your back has got that stiff feeling, that vulnerable feeling first thing in the morning, then walk around a little bit. Just spend the next 10 or 15 minutes upright, good posture. Don't go straight away and bend over the sink brushing your teeth or something like that. Give yourself that 10 or 15 minutes upright, move around, maybe you go and get yourself a glass of water, you have your coffee, tea, whatever you want to do, but stay upright. And that little bit of movement from walking around the house, yes, it might be a little bit uncomfortable, yes, you might feel a little bit vulnerable, but moving around the house is going to help just get things working a little bit better. And quite often you'll find that after 15 minutes or so, the feelings of stiffness and discomfort have already started to decline. Now the final bit of advice here pertains to phase one. Some people find that actually kicking things off in phase one, lying down in the bed before they even get up, can be helpful for them. They like that. They've done their core engagement in the bed, they've done maybe their shimmy to start off with, but their core engagement and psoas engagement on the bed. Then they've rolled to this position, done the hamstring stretch in this position here whilst they're sat up. Then they can get into the lunge. Then you can go back onto the bed and do the glutes and then do a bit of towel maybe on the bed or on the floor and go from there. Other people, they do need to do what I've discussed in this video, is go through those steps, get up, walk around for 15-20 minutes and then do the phase one. That really doesn't matter which one of those people you are, but test both. See which you find works best for you. Are you someone that actually benefits doing it right out the gate, doing phase one to help get those things moving a little bit better? Or are you someone that really finds it much easier, maybe even just logistically, to do it 20-30 minutes after waking up? Whichever is better for you, that's the important one to choose. So just to round this video up, getting out of bed in the morning and just general back pain, sciatica, your problem being worse first thing in the morning is very, very common. And we've discussed in this video some of the reasons for that, the vulnerabilities, the lack of muscle support at that time of day, the inflammation that's built up overnight, and then how we can effectively get out of bed. And whether we do our phase one immediately, partially maybe in bed, or after 15-20 minutes of being up and about, the choice is really yours. But this will really help you. If you can get this routine in place, it's really going to help you long term, not just while the back is bad first thing in the morning. Because as we discussed earlier, a lot of people will get out of bed like that first thing in the morning, and the back doesn't go overnight. These back injuries build up over consistent abuse, consistent wrong habits, consistent bad things. Hopefully many of these things you're already starting to address. Remember, we did that video, maybe put a link up here to it, on those 15 hours of the day that you aren't necessarily paying attention to, that are slowly wearing down that spine, and how those 15 hours are often a feature long before the back ever becomes a observable problem. Maybe it's just a little bit stiff and a little bit uncomfortable, as most back pain starts off with. But the amount of times we've seen people that come in and you go, oh, I've only had this for maybe a couple of weeks, this back problem. And then you start talking about it and they go, oh, well, my back's really been niggly. It's been a problem ever since my 20s. You know, and you're seeing them in their 30s or 40s, and you go, okay, well, so we've had practices that have been bothering the lower back for maybe 15-20 years before it finally reaches a critical mass and goes, which means that those practices are going to be really ingrained practices, like the way of getting out of bed in the morning, for example. Those practices are ingrained, and there's something that really will become a barrier to recovery once the back has become injured. The great thing is you've got all the power you need to deal with those things, to change those things. It just becomes a case of asking questions, figuring out what the things are that are problematic, like getting out of bed, like maybe doing the ironing, like some of the other activities that we've discussed in this series. And if you change those, you're going to have habits that are going to keep you well for the long term and keep your back in shape in the best sense of the word. So we've mentioned phase one of the Back in Shape program. If you're not already doing that, there's going to be a link probably up here or in the description or in the caption below. You can get started with that. It's free to join, free to start, free to get underway. And remember, we get a lot of people that sign up, but please go through the program, do the educational material, learn the phase one routine itself, learn why you're doing it. The better engaged, with the process you are, the better you will do. We can guarantee you that for sure. So if you did find the video helpful, please do give it a thumbs up. If you know someone else that could benefit from this, someone else that's struggling with their back, maybe it's a family member, whether it's a friend, maybe it's a work colleague, share this video with them. That really helps us help them, and it helps them no end. We can assure you of that. And as always, to stay up to date with the latest videos that we release, and we release 1, 2 every week, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Until then, we'll see you in another video.